Hi everybody, so nice to be here with you again this month. Let's jump right in. Last month, in continuation to last month, I was talking about the power of imagery, and this month I really want to expand now, because imagery being dominant language of the subconscious mind, dominant language of the brain, is where I want to go. I want to expand now further into some practical ways that you can begin to interrupt the negative loops that so many people are in, like stress, fear, worry, anxiousness. We've trained our nervous systems to perceive information, and in response to that stimulus, even if it's slightly stressful to us, we have a nervous system response. It happens that fast. We have trained our nervous systems into that fast of a response, fight or flight, and we've basically trained our brains to expect it, to expect to see the negative, and that piece is really important. So I want to go over just a few brain facts as we start. When we are in stress, the hippocampus, located deep in the center of our brains, it's altered when we're in stress. It inhibits GABA receptors, and if that's not relieved, this can lead to long-term stress-related illnesses. Studies have shown that stress begins to shrink the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is responsible for our learning and memory encoding and memory consolidation and our spatial navigation. So you can connect a dot right there to panic attacks. The amygdala is also impacted when we are in a stress response. Again, part of the limbic system and deep inside of the brain. It's the core of our neural system for processing fearful and threatening stimuli. That's our emotions, our survival instincts, and part of our memory encoding process, particularly the higher emotional responses. So what happens when we're in stress? So the hippocampus, our eyes and our ears take in the data, and they send the information to the amygdala, which then interprets the sights and the sounds. And in anxiety, the amygdala is responsible for that fearful response, that aggressive response, that defensive behavior. Think about that. So what's happening? We are conditioning ourselves to expect stress. Body's responding almost autonomically to it now. It's not quite, but it's fast. And then we immediately go into the inflaming. The amygdala grows, and we don't want that. We don't want our stress response to grow. We want our hippocampus not to shrink. That's our ability to make good choices. That's our learning. That's our decision-making process. So when the amygdala shrinks, when the hippocampus shrinks and the amygdala is inflamed, we are in a heightened emotional state of negativity. We then act out with potentially aggressive behavior. Landing? Making sense? So the more we experience stress, the more we shrink the hippocampus. So we're altering, not only are we changing how we respond to situations, we're altering our memories based on our perception of stress. That's important. And we're enlarging our amygdala, creating higher levels of stress hormones and heightened emotional responses. We're doing this every day, every day, every day. This becomes expected. This becomes our immediate response, and then we are in a stress response for most of our day, and we can almost go unconscious in it because we begin to expect it. That's important. So you see why we're not really talking about, in my opinion, the correct things when tragic events happen in the world. We're talking about gun control. Not that they're not important, they're extremely important, but are they the source? What's really happening? When we talk about mental illness, it almost kind of takes a broad stroke and puts the responsibility on the individual. But is it? Is it? Are we living in a society where you are respected and seen as someone who governs themselves? Someone with personal power? someone with control? Or are we blaming so that we don't really have conversations about how the whole system is set up? And what I mean by that is society, the whole ecosystem. So that's what I'm going to break down and tie back together again this month, as I like to do. I like to bring in pieces. I like to find the research. I like to bring in hypnotherapy and the understanding of how our minds work and tie it all together so that it starts to make sense, and then bring it right back to you, put it in your lap, and give you responsibility to make those choices for yourself. So think about it. Does the news tell you, I've mentioned this 2 months ago, is it in equal balance? Do we get all the same amounts of good news and good things happening in the world? No, we do not. Of course not. Why? Because we'd all be out doing things that made us feel good if we were. We'd have no reason to watch. It's fear-based. It's sensationalized. We have a stress response. In fact, if you're not sure if you have a stress response or not, have you ever found yourself watching the news and yelling back at the television? Vocalizing how you feel about it? That's not true. That can't be. Look what's going on there. That's not right. We have a response. That's your amygdala. That's your stress response. Amygdala is enlarging, and think about it, defensive posturing, changing our behavior, heightened emotion, can be aggressive, can be defensive. That's your amygdala responding. That's a stress response every day. Did you know that people in stress are much more likely to shop? COVID increased online shopping to $1.7 trillion. That's $609 billion more than 2 years before. And 44% of people said that their stress significantly increased over the past 5 years. Researchers are stating now that shopping gives people a sense of control. Isn't that interesting? We also know that the pleasure we get from shopping eases sadness, eases depression, eases loneliness, and the brain releases dopamine in anticipation of a reward. So this is how we're counteracting the heightened stress response. We are now creating a coping mechanism, and that can be shopping, that can be drinking, that can be sex, that can be all kinds of things that can fall into addictive behaviors. But why? Because we're in a stress response every day, because we've conditioned ourselves or been conditioned to expect it. And why does that matter? Because our brains create what we see. What we see is very important. And our body follows our thoughts. So those two pieces should indicate to each of us to really pay attention to those looping thoughts, what we expect. If we think that it's the outside condition that's the cause, and we've learned to expect it, there is an onus there that nothing's really happening in here. It's just what we're witnessing out there, and that it's separate somehow. I feel like this because of that, because of my job, because of the world. But is that what's really happening? We're taking it in, we're having a stress response, we're projecting it back out and calling that responsible. But that's not factual. We are responsible for our reactions to things, but we have to look at where those reactions were kind of programmed into us every day, all day, by expecting to see negativity, by having so much stimulus come at us that tells us everything that's wrong, everything that's broken. And if you notice, it becomes kind of hilarious that in those times of like at news, it's a big hour, right? All of the consumption levels go up. They know the ratings are higher, so they jam load them with marketing. And every drug commercial has happy people. They're healthy, they're riding bikes, they're holding hands, they're in love, they're swimming in the ocean. Take this, you will be happy and healthy. So you get your anticipation of a reward through what? Through a marketing strategy. These are not by accident. It's kind of interesting when you take a look at it. But what's really important to start to put together is, what am I responding to? And how can I change that? And what do I want instead? Where do I feel powerful? And where do I feel powerless? And are those empirical facts? So another really interesting fact is sleep tends to be interrupted when we're stressed. So learning tools to help us sleep better become very important. A sleeping brain can form fresh memories. Now, up until recently, that was denied by science. They did not believe that you could learn during sleep, and scientists did not believe that you were able to recall that. Excuse me. So a team of neuroscientists played complex sounds to people while they were sleeping, and afterwards the sleepers could recognize those sounds when they were awake. Why? Because the subconscious mind never sleeps. The subconscious mind's job is to constantly protect you. So it's still taking in all the stimulus. Your ears are still hearing sounds while you're sleeping, but your brain your brain waves have dropped down. So you're now in REM sleep or non-REM sleep, that we cycle through the night. The subconscious mind makes your heart beat all night. You don't have to do that. You don't have to think about breathing. You breathe all night. Your lungs expand and contract. So we are capable of learning while we're sleeping. Now, this is not, you're not going to go to sleep and wake up in the morning and speak a different language. That's not the same. Our brain is in a process when we are sleeping, and it needs to, like the brain detoxes at night as well and does a lot of work while we are not running energy to move our bodies. But your subconscious mind is still listening, and it's still aware. So it makes certain things very effective, which is why hypnosis has become a tool that's so powerful to drop those brain waves down, right? As soon as we close our eyes, close off access to the visual cortex, the brain starts firing off alpha waves. We start dropping down, preparing for sleep. But we, in hypnosis, are in a heightened state of awareness, accessing memories, changing that negative, dominant programming through heightened emotion. We can change these things. So what's also very interesting is during sleep, we don't act out our dreams. If we have dreams while the subconscious mind is reorganizing and recalibrating memories, the brain is working at night while we sleep. But did you know that there's a process called atopia, where it's temporary paralysis of your muscles, your arm and leg muscles, so that you're not acting out your dream in the night and potentially hurting yourself? Why? Subconscious mind is brilliant. Its job is to protect you. It's always trying to move you towards pleasure and away from pain. Its job is to keep you alive. So it never stops working for you. So how we perceive and respond and feel whether or not that's us doing that or it's an autopilot response becomes something to really ponder and pay attention to. We are unconscious a lot of the time. I've said in previous videos that by the time we are 35 years old, we have already figured out all of our opinions, and that we are basically projecting them. Different circumstances, same opinion, same opinion, same opinion. We're kind of unconscious a lot. So how do we become more conscious? We pay attention to things. We ask questions. We develop curiosity. We look into it. We check in with ourselves. How does that make me feel? How am I responding to this? Is there a different way that I can be responding to this? Is this a factual truth for me? Do I believe this? Do I believe that I have no choice in this? Every time we have new thoughts, we fire and wire new synaptic pathways in the brain. So this also happens when we are in nature. This ability to create new thought patterns, but in this state of almost hypnosis. We call it environmental hypnosis. In fact, you've heard me mention this before. Every one of us has done this. Raise your hand if you've ever driven home and you don't quite remember it. You don't remember the drive. You're just pulling up into your driveway and you think, wow, I don't even remember getting off the highway. I don't even remember turning down the street. I don't even remember doing that. Environmental hypnosis. Same thing if you're reading a really good book. You just go off into the book. Watching a really good movie, not a stressful movie, but a really feel-good movie. We go off into that state, heightened awareness, but deeply relaxed physical body. We also get that when we're walking in nature. We just release into the sounds, right? You're looking at the gorgeous mountains, or here where I live, I like to walk along this bike path where there's a pond and there's beavers and there's beautiful trees and hundreds of years old pine trees, the birds, the frogs, it's spring, it's amazing, and you just completely relax. So what happens? We go back into a parasympathetic drive. We then shift from fight or flight into rest and digest. That's more blood flow to the immune system, reproductive system, higher thinking mind. Our learning, our ability, our memory improves by walking in nature by 20%. So it's extraordinary. The amygdala decreases because we're out of a fight or flight response. Our emotions settle. Right? The stress hormones release and are balanced. They're neutralized. The hippocampus then expands and the dopamine centers open up and we begin to feel better. So instead of shopping, we're walking in nature. Instead of drinking, we're walking in nature. We're getting the same response. It's a reward response because it feels good. Our body responds to being in nature. So we can begin to utilize multiple things to bring back our sense of power and our sense of control, but in healthy ways. Scientifically, it's been proven that walking in nature daily benefits our bodies and, very importantly, our brains. And I recently read a story that I want to share the highlights with you about. He was a gentleman, a war veteran named Will Acuna Robinson. And it was published recently, in which he reports that through hiking, he says, I learned I was capable of living. I was capable of leading. I was capable of inspiring and motivating. Hear the words. That was something I had completely lost for a decade plus. I started peeling back the layers mile after mile after mile. So those words are important. Peeling back the layers. So he was inspired by the best-selling book Wild, written by Cheryl Strayed. It was a phenomenal story if you've never read it. And I want you to hear that last sentence. I started peeling back the layers. What does that mean? So of what? Layers of what? PTSD, anxiety, depression, all the things he said he had that went away when he was walking in nature. Now, he walked over 8,000 miles. He did all three main trails in the U.S. Those are the Pacific Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Continental Divide, I believe, is the third trail. So we're talking about someone who was not functioning well in society and started to hike every day. And over that time, so what's happening in that time? Environmental hypnosis. You're in a state of just receiving nature. So what's happening? Body goes into subconscious response. What else is happening? Those layers that are peeling back, revisiting memories that are coming up. And what's happening? Patterns are being interrupted. Why? Because you're not expecting a stress response. You're now expecting relaxation. You're expecting to see beauty. You're expecting to release all that tension. Your brain creates what you see. And your body follows your thoughts. So those layers are what? Memories in the subconscious mind. Amygdala is now shrinking. Hippocampus is back to its normal size. We are learning, we're taking in, we are feeling healthy, well, vibrant, capable. Hear his words. I'm now capable of. That's not by accident. That's the subconscious mind reorganizing the trauma, reorganizing the negative response, because every day, repetition, subconscious mind learns through repetition, every day he would hike. And then every day you learn to expect beauty, expect peace, expect beautiful rhythmic breathing, expect your body to feel better. This is reprogramming the conscious mind through the skills and capabilities of the subconscious, because you're walking around in environmental hypnosis the whole time. It's really quite extraordinary. Now, who has the power for that? We do. Who makes that choice? We do. Now, do you have to go out and walk 8,000 miles to accomplish that? No, but what an extraordinary story. That's walking in nature completely healed him because he was utilizing the hypnotic state and reframing all of his negative trauma with the expectation of beauty and peace and healing. That's our power. That's our ability. You utilize that through the hypnotic state every time you do hypnosis. It's why we have a daily practice. It's not only once in the beginning to get you the resources you need and to do, whether it's age regression, whatever's necessary to reframe the critical incidences that have come up for you, and in order to serve the goal that you're after, whether it's healing, whether it's more money in your business, whether it's confidence, whether it's weight loss, it doesn't matter what the goal is. It's how do we get there because we've got things in the way. And so we bridge that gap by utilizing hypnosis and the skills of the subconscious mind. But then we maintain it going forward because why wouldn't we? There's always something else that we want. And you're not going to get these resources by the same patterns you had before you started. Those patterns are what conditioned you to be in a stress response every day. So that's where the conscious change comes into play. Making sense? I want you to understand how your brain functions and how you contribute to it because your body follows your thoughts. And if your thoughts are unconscious most of the time, expecting negativity, then it's logical that the body breaks down, but we don't learn that. So we think it's our genetics, or we think it's the luck of the draw, or we think it's karma, or we think we're just a really bad person. That's not the case. Some of those things come into play at different times, whether it's past life, whether it's karmic overlay, sure. But is that the norm? No. The norm is we are so conditioned to be in a stress response and then marketed to for solutions and resources. But that doesn't have to be our normal. If we choose to be more conscious about how we perceive the world, what we expect, and what we do for our own stress relief, retraining our brains. So that's when we expand into new territory, right? Creating all the opportunities that we desire. The subconscious mind, we project from our dominant beliefs and attract back people, places, and things that match them. So change those dominant beliefs, change the opportunities out in front of you. That then becomes what we expect. We expect more. We expect more clients. We expect more growth in our business. We expect more love in our relationships. We expect more health in our life. And not because someone else has to give it to us. Not because someone else has to change what they believe or who they are or what they do. Because we are responsible for ourselves. This is what leadership starts to look like. Self-governance, self-leadership. And the piece that no one really ever talks about is you are already wired for it. You have everything you need already within you. Your subconscious mind is designed to work this way for you. It's working perfectly for you. You're just getting everything you don't want. But how extraordinary that it's working perfectly for you. You can use all the same understandings and reframe that for the positive. And be the one person out of the whole room that's getting everything that they want, that lights up the room, that feels powerful, that feels they're contributing, that loves their life, doesn't need approval from anyone else, isn't looking for someone else to tell them what to do, and doesn't buy into everything society has told you. You can be that person too. The mechanism doesn't judge, it works exactly the same, but you are responsible for it. Otherwise, it just works on autopilot based on everything that you decided before you were 35. So that's your parents' programming, that's your schooling, that's your experiences when you were younger. Now, I don't know about you, but a whole lot of my beliefs changed long after 35, right? When we're going through our growth when we're young in our youth, we're really comparing ourselves to others. We're trying to fit in, or we're trying to not stand out, and we're comparing ourselves constantly, and we're impacted by the authority of the group, right? Peer pressure. Think of peer pressure. So are you still who you were before you were 35? Do you still believe the things about yourself you believe then? I hope not, because we're designed to expand and grow. And if you are, that's okay. Recognize it right here in this moment. Become present with it and say, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. That's not who I am anymore. Isn't that interesting to know that I'm just sort of already pre-programmed, but I can change that? Yes, you can. You don't need to buy into anything that tells you the outside condition has the control and power. That, to me, was a conversation worthy of having, to understand how your brain works, how your subconscious mind works, how you are responsible for all of it, and it's designed to be working once it's learned what you want. Isn't that extraordinary? So it's up to you. So the question becomes, what do I want? What do I really want? And what do I believe about it? Do I immediately, is there a but right after that? Do I tell myself I'm not worthy? Do I tell myself it's not possible? Do I tell myself I have to do these other things and check everything off the list before I can have that? Are those empirical truths? Does everybody do it that way? These are things, if you really think about it, they are worthy of sitting quietly and considering and peeling back the layers of, and then getting out for a walk in nature, getting into a daily hypnosis practice that's custom just for you, learning how to utilize the most important functionality you have is your brain. Your brain. Your body follows your thoughts, and your brain creates what you see. So I wish you a wonderful rest of your month. Be healthy, be happy, be conscious more, even 1% more, even if that's to learn to question your response to things just because you can. We'll start to send you down a different path. We'll start to create different synaptic pathways in your brain. We'll start to give you resources to get out of that conditioned stress response. And stop believing that because everything out here is playing out due to a collective belief that that has to be yours as well. You have everything you ever needed right within you, and it was designed that way intentionally. So it's time to start to learn about the operator's manual. And with that, I'll turn it back to you in the studio. Have a wonderful rest of your show. See you next month. Be well.